The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
Game 6 of the Battle of Ontario goes Thursday night in Canada at the Canadian Tire Centre. The Leafs have a 3-2 series lead. Now, if you somehow haven't been paying attention, you're like in the small, minuscule percentage of people who aren't based in Canada, aren't based in Ontario, and somehow haven't paid attention to the series at all. You look at the Leafs holding down a 3-2 lead, and you're like, oh, okay, they have an opportunity to clinch. We all know that's not the sentiment around Leafs fans. This team was up 3-0. They've lost the last 2 games. The seed of doubt has firmly been planted in Toronto. It's a word here before we get into how the players feel. Like, I get why Leafs fans are reacting this way. Like, there very much is a, oh no, there's here we go again type feel, except the stakes are much worse than blowing a 3-1 lead, potentially.
Yeah, look, this is how big of a day it is. I wandered through the wilds of Canada and I bought 2 coffees this morning at Starbucks.
2 of them.
It's going to be a great day. Here's the thing. There's the fan sentiment and the media sentiment, and I'm part of that. I've written some stories that fuel this too, so I'm certainly not distancing myself. But I don't have any sense yet that the players have a seed of doubt, if that makes sense. Like, the demeanor of the team really hasn't changed much. Now, we realize, though, going like that, first of all, we haven't gone to the morning skate before Game 6. Maybe it'll feel tighter when we get there at Canadian Tire Centre this morning. Maybe if the Leafs lose and we're going to a Game 7, I'll have a different opinion on this. But I'll say after Game 5, they were still pretty calm in the Leafs dressing room. It's just, outside of that, I almost feel like you can't overreact because of the history. Like, that's my view. I mean, look, you wrestle with it yourself. What are we going to say on this podcast? What am I going to write? I mean, you have to win 4 games in a series. In theory, it doesn't matter what order you win them in, right? As long as you're the first team to win 4. But I think the way this is playing out is part of, it's just happened before, right? And the Leafs have lost from ahead in series. They've come back down 3-1 as recently as last year and lost the Game 7 to Boston. Like, they've lost in every which way. The one common denominator is they've lost almost every time they've been in this situation. And so, you can change out half the roster, which they have. You can change the head coach, which they have. But I think people are wondering, I mean, this would be the most spectacular of the losses, even just by the fact, they haven't been up 3-0 in a series, and got to a point where it's at the end. So, I mean, it's grand theater. It's what makes the playoffs fantastic. You see it in other series, like the ups and downs and the swings and emotions. The Oilers look dead after 2 games, and in LA, they find a way somehow to win 2 games in Edmonton to even that series, and then they deliver a monster performance back on the road in LA in Game 5. And all of a sudden, the Oilers are in the exact same position as the Leafs, ahead 3-2, entering a Game 6. I guess the difference is Edmonton's at home for Game 6, Toronto's on the road, which, will be a factor. I think the building's going to be pretty special tonight in Ottawa. But man, it just shows you, like, the playoffs start and all hell breaks loose. And that's really where we're at in the series, man. All hell is breaking loose, and it could get a whole lot more interesting over the weekend if we have one more game in this series beyond Thursday.
So how did we get here? The first 3 games in this series, the Leafs power play on 1, just like 5 goals, I think, on 9 opportunities. Anthony Stolarz looked like the best goalie in this series. And Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner were still at least getting assists, even if they weren't necessarily scoring the lights out, but they were getting contributions up and down the lineup. We were talking about Simon Benoit as like a Leafs hero for like 2 days. So why are we at a point where the Sens are back in it? And I can break down some of that too, but they're back in it, and they, again, have planted that seed of doubt in the Leafs.
Well, from where I sit, Ottawa has played a really strong team game. Ullmark playing well is, like, we can't look past that. I mean, no matter how we might brand things at the start of the series, I don't think he looked ready. I had serious questions about whether he was going to last, just the way, he looked very shaky and the goals were going in early. And yes, there were some bounces and all this, but I mean, this guy is meant to be a huge part of that team. And, we've seen a different player. Like, I thought right in the first period of Game 5, he looked great. I thought his rebound control was really strong. Obviously, the Leafs did have the one power play in that game in the first period. It ended up being 69 seconds because Matthew Nyes took a penalty of his own. But Toronto had 6 shots in that 69-second sequence, and they were dangerous shots. Like, the power play was buzzing. And quite honestly, if the Leafs score there, probably a different game. Honestly, like, it's only one goal, but I think it changes the mood. The Ottawa's going to then have to push to tie. The Leafs are going to feel confident. The building's going to get behind the team. Those are the swings and momentum in playoffs. So I think Ullmark has been a huge factor for Ottawa. And, the Senators players, their guys are playing well, right? I mean, Sanderson's been awesome. I mean, he's the standout of the series from Ottawa's end. It's not to diminish anyone else's contributions, but he's the one guy when he's on the ice, I'm like, oh wow, okay, like look how he skates so fast and he's logging huge minutes and he's obviously young. He's been on for goals against too. Like, it's not been perfect, but you can see his confidence growing. He's being more assertive in this environment. And that's a huge, that's a swing player for the Senators. Like, I think when he's on his game, like he's a game breaker on that side. So it's like the combination. The team is stuck with it. Ullmark, special teams are huge, right? Like, to get shorthanded goals in 2 games, like, that's the stuff. It's hard to win a game when you give up a shorthanded goal in the playoffs, generally speaking. Like, I know there've been some big scores, but like most of the games literally are 2-1, 3-2 type of games. And if you're on a power, you're only going to usually get 1 or 2 or 3 power plays per game. So you have to score on your power play. And so when you not only don't score on the power play, which the Leafs haven't done in the last 2 games, which were losses, they gave up 1 on their own power play. I mean, to me, it's almost as simple as like, that is a massive difference in those games, because you look at the overall shots and all the underlying numbers. Like, it's not like one team or the other is dominating this series. Toronto has had looks. They certainly, Steven Lorentz, was on a 2-0 breakaway in the last game. Like, it didn't really get discussed much in post game. Obviously, he's a 4th line player for the Leafs. There's a great chance. Mitch Marner had a clear look in the slot, one that he scores many, many times, didn't score. Matthew shot wide on a 2-on-1, and then they didn't score on their power plays. And that's the game. I mean, that's the difference. I mean, I know it's 4-0. It'll go down in history as 4-0. It was really a 2-0 game, right? And it was a 1-0 game until 12 minutes left in the third period. And the Leafs had a power play. They had a chance to tie a great chance to tie the game there. So, I guess what I'm getting at is when people say the margins are slim, like, those are the margins we're talking about in this series. And the Sens have reclaimed them, right? Like, they're having their moments and good for them, because I think the hardest thing about being down 3-0 beyond the obvious is that you have to win 4 straight games, which is just difficult to do at any point, is sort of maintaining your belief and bringing your best game. Like, I think that can be difficult for teams emotionally, especially losing 2 straight overtime games. Like there could have been an emotional letdown in that circumstance for the Senators, but they've kept playing, they're among their best games, if not close to their best level. And, now we see, can the Leafs summon the emotion needed? Can they summon the focus and the execution needed? Because we definitely didn't see it. Once Game 5 got deeper in and it became a little more desperate, like, the Leafs didn't meet the moment. Their best players just weren't there. Like, that, it's narrative, partly this whole core 4 thing, but it's also not narrative. Like, Austin Matthews gave the puck away on the power play that led to the 2-on-1 rush. William Nylander may be guilty on that play of not back checking hard enough to make up for a teammate's mistake. Like, and those players didn't score. And at the end of the day, Nylander had 45 goals this year. He's got 1 in 5 games in the series. Austin Matthews has 2 goals in his last 15 playoff games. I mean, I get it. If Cal Yarncroke scored or Scott Laughton scored for Toronto, or you got a Brandon Carlo goal out of nowhere, like, those count too. And those are great. And teams that go on runs definitely need secondary contributions usually to keep it going. But, I feel like I'm hitting the drum the same way we've hit it for about 5 straight years, and it ends some. But in those big moments, you're looking for Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares. I actually think Tavares probably is, for me, he's like almost a little to the side. I don't think you expect quite as much out of him. And I think he's played pretty well in the series. Honestly, I think he has scored some of those big goals. Obviously, it didn't come in Game 5, but even in Game 4, he gets the one late in the first period. He was on that night, him and Nylander. That's kind of where we're at for me. And as I say, good on the Senators because they're playing a good game too, and it's probably getting lost. I'm focused a little bit more on the Toronto end of this series. It's getting lost a little bit in the analysis because there's so much focus on, it's like a Leafs referendum. We got that Canadian election out of the way earlier this week. Now it's a referendum on the Leafs again.
Geez, that election feels like, I know it was just like earlier this week. That feels like a whole world away. I don't know if you feel that same thing too. It's just like day by day, like things just happen and then you just see immediately what happened the day before. But anyway, we don't have to belabor the point about the election. It's a total
time warp. Like I was just before we started recording, I'm like, what games are tonight? Like I know we're going to the game we're covering tonight, but beyond that, I was just like the other series, sometimes there's a 2-day, anyway, like you're not able to watch as much of the other series as you'd like just because of the timing and scheduling, travel. But honestly, it's the best. Like none of this is a complaint. There's nothing like this 2 weeks. Think about it in our jobs. Like even if it gets to the second round and you're still traveling, like there's just less games on the off days. Like you're down to 4 series. Even now, I know we're going to get to it. 3 teams have been eliminated, Julian. We're down, and then there were 13. Yeah. We're down to 13 teams with a chance at the Stanley Cup. And after tonight, could be many less than that.
Okay, let me try to fill in some blanks. Obviously, provide the Leafs perspective on things. Let me try to at least fill some blanks on the Sens side. Oh, first on Linus Ullmark. I'm still thinking about that post-game press conference after Game 5. And I don't think this has been talked about at all. That was the most reined-in Linus Ullmark after a game that I've seen all year. And what I mean by that is his relationship with the media.
He's a wild card. Let's call it.
That's it. He is.
You don't know what you're going to get when he's behind a microphone. It could go in a lot of different directions.
Exactly. But in terms of how he responded to everything, he kind of went at it super, I don't want to say basic, but like just kind of calm, measured. There was no sassiness. And I'm inclined to believe that's extended to how he's been as this series has gone on. I think after Game 1, where, he allows the 6 goals, he probably had to work through some things after that. He's had to bounce back after some tough performances throughout the season. And then with his back firmly at the wall, down 3-0, he's trying to just, instill belief in his boys, as he said. And now I think we're seeing a guy who's gotten better and better as the series has gone on. And I think he's starting to lock in. It's on him to maintain that focus for Game 6 and Game 7 if needed. But I think that plays a huge part in that. So I'll give a note to Ullmark on that. Jake Sanderson, you mentioned him earlier. I think he might be the best defenseman in this series. I think with the way that he's been able to shut down some moments in whether in the slot on the PK or at 5-on-5 as well, he's playing into that aggression that the Sens defense is showing. You're right, he's been on for goals against, but I just think with the minutes he's been able to log and what he's been able to do at both ends, if he's not the best defenseman in the series, I think he should at least be considered for that as well. And speaking of that aggression, I think the Sens PK, we kept asking Travis Green and players about it. They say they haven't changed much, but I think they're starting to finally feel comfortable with that diamond formation, which I know some people in the media here have been a little, we have our thoughts about that formation and how the players are set and the guys who could be left alone on the goal line, whether it's 1 forward in front or 2 in front, however teams do their formation on the power play. But the big key for the Sens is how aggressive they play down low when teams try to work their way towards the net. I think there's been some moments where they've been able to benefit off of that, and they've stymied the Leafs in that front, but also Linus Ullmark deserves credit for that as well. Also, one more thing. You mentioned the
They're trying to prevent the cross ice passes, right? Like,
yes.
Most goals are scored, generally speaking, when you get the goalie moving because he can't be set he can't cover every part of his net, or obviously tips and screens and things maybe where he doesn't see it or it moves in a direction where he's not prepared for it. I guess that the diamond clogs up the middle of the ice a little bit more. So, if you're thinking of like Matthews on one side and Nylander on the other on the Leafs power play, they're not really able to go side to side maybe as much as they'd like. And we've seen actually the Leafs power play likes to funnel pucks now down to the net where you've had Nyes and Tavares both there. It's interesting. Like, and the tactical side really matters in the playoffs because that they're not just now looking at each other's like how you line up. They're talking about the player's strengths and weaknesses. That's the cool part of the series. Like that's where I wish, and neither coach in this series is like this. And look, but neither wants to get into that stuff. But it actually is kind of interesting when coaches explain some of their rationale. But we're in a little bit of either I don't talk about tactics or it's a state secret. Even Craig Berube pulled that card, just to not to interrupt your thought there, Julian, but he was asked about one of the ways the Leafs can be better offensively, and he's like, I don't want to tell you if that's okay. like kind of, it's sort of like, I got some thoughts, but I'm not going to share them here with 20 reporters around.
Yeah, when I asked Travis Green yesterday about why teams would use the diamond and the fact that he was able to give some kind of answer to that, I was like, I'll take that. It's kind of silly. Dude is trying to keep as much as he can to the chest, whether it's lineup stuff or injury stuff. Not that he was all that revealing anyway throughout the year, but yeah, Travis Green definitely.
One exception from earlier in the series, I asked Chris Tanev about the challenge of the Stützle line, and he went player by player on the line and named their numbers. He's like 18, great through the middle. I don't have the quote exactly in front of me, so I don't want to butcher his scouting report, but it was actually hilarious. And he broke it down, and then I later asked him about why he answered that way, and he said it was an homage to Daryl Sutter. So,
that's actually true. That's very true. That is a Daryl Sutter thing. What did you think of when Chris Tanev said? And I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but he said the team will be fine when obviously the team still has the series lead, but he essentially said this team's fine.
The rational thing for him to say. I mean. The reaction would be irrational if there wasn't a history, right? No team, and this is the lead of the story I wrote. So if you read it, I'm stealing my own work again. But no team could be ahead 3-1 in a series and get booed on home ice in Game 5 almost under any circumstances anywhere. Like even if you were getting blown out in that game, you're still like, well, our team has 2 chances to win. But the Leafs aren't just any other team, right? And so Chris Tanev is new to the market. He's been on lots of playoff runs. I mean, he played Stanley Cup final games a long time ago. He played last year with Dallas into the Western Conference final, had a big part in shutting down Jack Eichel and Nathan McKinnon as they beat Vegas and Colorado to get to round 3. So I think if you're like not living in the media, not living, just seeing through the Toronto lens, you're probably like, what is we're up 3-2. Like, yeah, it's not great. Tonight's performance that might add some holes, but we're in a good spot. So I think he was actually being literal. Honestly, I don't think he was trying to play like media mind games or trying to like speak positivity into reality. I think it was just from his perspective, they're fine. But he hasn't been here before with the Leafs. I mean, specifically, he wasn't part of those stats that keep getting rolled out, the 1-13 or whatever in elimination games, and 30 straight power plays in those games without scoring and all that kind of thing. And I'm going to guess, even in the time since the game was played, he hasn't spent much time researching all that. We'll just do it for him, in the moments when the games aren't being played.
Yeah, Chris is, I mean, look, Chris is, I still think Chris is a much smarter guy than more than meets the eye with him. I don't think he's worrying about little silly details that us reporters have to deal with.
I think honestly, he's one of my favorite guys to talk to in the Leafs room.
Yes.
He's very thoughtful on the game. He really thinks about questions. You know what I mean? Like, you don't get just a visceral reaction to what you're asking. Like, he's, contemplating it, and not because, I think I've always got a soft spot for the older guys, frankly. I mean, I think anyone who can bring experience to their answers, like, it's not to say you can't learn from the younger players, because what you get from them more often is just honest, like, emotional reactions. But, whether it's Max Pacioretty or David Perron or Claude Giroux, like, I'm not just saying this because I'm an older guy that's known some of those players for a while, but I do find you get a different layer of perspective on these moments or on things that happen in the game or what have you when they're behind the mic.
Yeah, and you get because they've been in the game so long, because they've answered a lot of these questions before, but also with the wisdom that they have, they're able to share more. Like a David Perron, I think, is one of the best examples at this. Like, he just feels so comfortable in English and in French, just sharing what he's seen throughout his career, whether it's in the playoffs or whether it's on a player. Like, you tend to, maybe treasure's not the right word, but like as a reporter, you like going to players like him for insight. Some guys, it varies in terms of the comfort level with us, I guess. But a guy like David Perron, I think, is a perfect example for that. But for Chris Tanev too, like when he was in Calgary, I loved talking to him whenever I needed to, just for his insights on guys and how he was as a kind of quiet, but just like a sturdy leader in that locker room in Calgary. Like I'm glad that people in Toronto like talking to him, because that's essentially what he was like in Calgary as well. And I'm sure other people in other markets with him could say the same.
You know, another example is Max Pacioretty spoke before Game 5, and he was asked just a general question about like hostility in the playoffs. And he mentioned that when he was younger, and he cited the Bruins and Habs rivalry, like he would get caught up in kind of the talk about all that stuff and like even feeling a certain way based on how he was supposed to feel. And he's like, as you get older, like he's like, you just stop paying attention to what everyone's saying about the series. But he's like, it's your job to actually just hate whoever you're playing. Is what he said. He's like, you got to be willing to die on the ice in the playoffs. Anyway, like it was kind of an interesting answer. Like he immediately clocked back to earlier in his career when he would maybe, you know, we were all hyping the Battle of Ontario, like before this thing started and talking about the old days. And he was sort of saying when he was younger, he would have probably bought into that. But nowadays, you know, he's got a bunch of kids and you know, probably bigger concerns when he's not at the rink and when he knows what his job is, no matter who he's playing when he gets there.
Okay. My thought that got cut off and we completely veered away from in the last,
we took a long walk through the parking lots of Canada. And now we're going to get back to the main event.
Canada's just nothing but parking lots as far as I've seen. Anyway, we don't have to make it about Canada. I was just going to give the Steven Lorentz moment that you're referencing here. He has the 2-on-0. That is a hell of a run back from Nicholas Montempallo to break up that 2-on-0, and that doesn't turn into a shot on net. Like, I think he deserves credit for how he skates back and breaks that up. I thought there were so many moments in Game 5. I thought, all right, this is a sure goal for the Leafs. That power play in the third period, the Sens up 1-0. In my head, I'm thinking, all right, the Leafs are scoring and they're finding a way to get a second goal to be up 2-1 and clinch on home ice. Because I still have it in my head, and I think the Sens also recognize this too. This is still a very different team. I know the core four is the core four, but everything else insulated around them is different. So my expectation was that it would be a different outcome in that Game 5. And then all of a sudden, it's Adam Gaudette and Dylan Cousins. Dylan Cousins, who doesn't normally penalty kill, Adam Gaudette also in a situation where he was telling us yesterday he's playing PK minutes essentially for the first time in the NHL. He did that a little bit more in college and in high school, but he's wanted to be in those moments. And that goal from Dylan Cousins, there was like a complete vibe shift, shorthanded. I know there was a lot to go through the last couple moments, but man.
I mean, and look, you could still come back down 2-0, but it just feels you're right. Just a massive swing in the game. You know, that was probably the defining moment in the game, frankly, because as you say, you go from not just whatever you're thinking, people in the building, even the Leafs bench are thinking, okay, this is the time for a power play to get us a goal. And then brand new hockey game. And, you know, the Leafs, it's funny, the 5-forward formation, you know, has been really ridiculous with the conversion rate. I mean, even in this series, it's still over 30%. So every team, you know, obviously the Leafs have failed to score in the last two games, which they didn't win with the power play. And they had some big power plays, including an overtime in Game 4 to end the series. But every team pretty much would take 30%. Like at the start of the playoffs, if you said, you guys are going to click on 30% of the power plays, I think you'd like sign off on that. But they haven't actually really given up a lot of shorthanded goals historically. Again, it's been a relatively new experiment, just a couple months. And then to give them up in back-to-back games, like, I actually asked Craig Berube about that. Like, as good as it's been, are you thinking about putting a defenseman back there just for a little more comfort on what could happen the other way? And he said no, although he did mention that they'll talk about it. But you know, the vibe I got was that it's not. I guess they'll make the trade off that maybe occasionally they're going to give up a high danger chance, but those are pretty high danger chances between the Shane Pinto breakaway in Game 4 and then that 2-on-1. I mean, you know, those aren't on the goalie, even though like you'd love to see Stolar squeeze the save because he did sort of stop the initial Pinto shot. It kind of leaked through him. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's still, at the end of the day, it's still a shorthanded breakaway. So anyway, I've lost my point here a little bit.
No.
But merely saying, I just was curious if maybe they'd break up what's been a successful power play unit because of worrying about how much of a swing that can be, you know, when you give up a shorthanded goal under these conditions.
I can't see them doing that. That would be really foolish on their part if they start just really meddling with things on that front. Because again, they've had that success. I think, and plus the fact too, they're still dominating the Sens in face-offs too. particularly when they're in the offensive zone, particularly when they have the man advantage. Like, just keep playing to that and just get pucks on net. Honestly, like, you're gonna have to play around that aggression that the Sens are providing on the PK. But if you start really meddling with things, I think the Leafs veer more into trouble.
It's an interesting question, right? Like, I feel like, and this could apply, and we could apply this to even some of the other series, but there's always that line in the playoffs when you're a coach, when things aren't going in a way that your team likes. Like, how much do you just say, we're going to stick to what got us here and we're not going to do anything crazy? Or how much do you want to just be like, all right, brand new lines, this player in from the press box, switch the goalie, switch the power play? Like, because sometimes an action looks like you're just, it's too passive. Like, finding that line, I think, is a big part of what coaches do in the playoffs, quite honestly, is between when is the right moment to do something drastic and when is the moment in the face of bad results or bad, outputs that you're like, do you know what? Screw it. Like, we're just going to keep doing it. Like, we're going to keep rolling with this because we're going to score 2 goals the next game. And then who cares about the 2 we gave up? Like, that's what it comes down to. And the one thing I'll say, if we look at the game Thursday night, is we don't really know what Craig Berube is going to do. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious to me that Nick Robertson will probably come into this game for Toronto, just because he scored 3 different times. He scored in his first game back from a healthy scratch just this season, and he really wasn't scratched that much this season. Like, it's the reason people make a big deal of that is it was almost every time he came back after some time in the press box, he found a way to score. But like, beyond that, Berube wasn't tipping his hand. We'll see if we get a view at the morning skate, but I do expect some changes. Like, I think you have to, like, their second line in Toronto, like, they've been cycling through a left winger. I mean, it's been Pontus Holmberg in the last game when they got down. Max Domi had some time there. Kelly Yarncroke was there. No team probably feels like they have all the exact right pieces. They're trying to build the nice Lego, like young CJ was a big Lego guy. You're trying to build the perfect house, but maybe you're missing the block you need. Like, that's a bit what it feels like when it comes to the Leafs roster construction. But I don't think they're alone in that, I guess, is what I'm getting at or hitting at here. Maybe Bobby McMahon could be the answer if he could, he's had a really long stretch here without a goal. Maybe if he was watching the Jets game on Wednesday, he could take some hope from Vlad Namestnikov scoring, which was pretty awesome because his goal song in Winnipeg was a Holden game goal, was "Who Let the Dogs Out?" And they finally let the dogs out. It was his first goal in 20 odd games. So Vlad Namestnikov, it was a big goal and he let the dogs out. Who let the dogs out? Ooh. But, the Leafs could use something like that from one of their guys like Bobby McMahon, who hasn't scored. Anyway, my thoughts are all over the place. I'm just saying we don't know what the lineup's going to be, and I would expect some changes, even if they're not wholesale, drastic, reinvent the wheel changes.
What do you think is going to happen in Game 6?
I got no clue, man.
I love the honesty.
Logically, I would say the Leafs are still going to win the series just because, the history speaks for itself. It's been so rare to come back from, 0-3 down. The Leafs have not lost 4 games in a row all season long. This is game 87, so that's a pretty meaty sample of opportunities. Even if you look in Leafs history, they've been up 3-0 6 previous times. Only once did it even go to Game 7. That was in the 1945 Stanley Cup Final, which some of my older colleagues said was a real barn burner, but I don't remember it myself. Leafs won that one over Detroit in Game 7 after blowing the 3-0 lead. But, the point is like, I think even among all the hysteria and whatever, I would normally say the Leafs, but I do wonder about, I think the history is relevant. I don't think it's just a discussion point. Even Craig Berube, he's not wrong. He's like, all I hear around here is core 4. It's like, yeah, but there is a reason for that. You have tied half your salary cap up in 4 players, and there's opportunity cost in that, right? Like it's not being critical of those players. I'm not even saying they're overpaid, but if you decide to do that, you do have less money to spend elsewhere. It means those players have to carry more of the load than their counterparts in other cities. Like it does speak to like what this is in Toronto. And so, when you have those players they've gone through the experiences of losing so many times in games like this. And this is where I say, like, they have had some of those Game 7s. They almost had like no energy. They were so tight. They never got anything going. They just got beat. Some of the game sevens, including last year, they had a lead in the third period in game 7 and lost. Mm-hmm. Some of them, they just got behind and couldn't get back in the game and had a tough call go against them. I think of the one closeout game against Tampa. It looked like John Tavares tied the game, and then Justin Holl got called for like a weird pick play on
I remember that
one of the Lightning.
Play.
But I'm saying that swung it against them. My point is they've lost this game in so many different ways, from ahead, from behind, when they did have legs and maybe just a tough call goes against them or a tough goal against one of their goalies. Like, they have lost this thing in so many different ways over so many different years. Like, I can't discount the possibility it happens again. I can't discount the possibility that they seize up in the face of all this. So what do I think is going to happen? Honestly, my brain tells me the Leafs are going to win the series, but I also don't want to just quickly brush aside the fact that, like, they might be not favored. If it goes to game 7, think about this. They might not be favored on home ice in game 7. And not that I don't pay a lot of attention to betting lines, but, there's a reason why those companies that run betting sites exist. They usually do a good job of handicapping what's going to happen. And they got people that literally, computers and people that are employed to figure that stuff out. Like, it feels like the Leafs are trailing well ahead 3-2 in the series. That's how weird it is. But that being said, if I had to like lay down at what I think is going to happen, I think they're going to get the job done.
I think the Leafs are going to win in 6. I think they'll prove people wrong, and I think with the pressure on their back, they should find a way to get it going on the road. I think of this, the Sens, the last 2 home games they had, they split them obviously, but they weirdly enough had these lulls just as the crowd is like fully behind them. And I don't know if it's just because just with whatever pressure they put on themselves and what just them throwing everything but the kitchen sink at them and they get fatigued. I can see that totally playing out in this game 6. That being said, if the Leafs fail to get the job done and we go 7, I think the Sens end up winning it. And I'll tell you this much. If we get a game 7, I think the crowd in Scotiabank Arena will be a lot quieter than we've ever heard it all series. And I don't think Steve Dangle is going to mention my name on that stream ahead of game 7 if we get to do that as he did for game 5. So that's as far as I want to go with that. I don't think, like, sometimes I think the crowd doesn't really matter. But I think it does.
That's like we could agree to disagree. But it's more in this case. I think it's like the nervous energy would be palpable. Like, it's going to be hard under those circumstances for a team like the Leafs to play their best game. I think not just the crowd, just everything, right? Like, these guys are human, even though that they're superhuman in the things they can do on the ice. And I say that for players on both teams. I'm not like building up the Leafs. I'm just saying, like, these players do things you and I could never even imagine doing ourselves. But like, they're going to feel things, right? They're going to have here we go again thought, even just for a minute, even if they're trying to like push it out of their brain. I mean, that game would be absolute theater if it happened.
Yeah, we got to wait and see on that one, man. Go ahead.
I'll share an anecdote with you. This one's a bit dated, but I remember Tampa Bay All-Star Game. Do you remember what year that was? 2017, 2018? It was a while ago. 2018, I think. And I bumped into Brendan Shanahan during that All-Star Game, and we were just chatting. And I don't even know how we got on the topic of playoffs and his experiences, but I can remember what hotel we were in, and we were chatting kind of in the lobby area. And he was saying that, like, when the Red Wings finally won a Stanley Cup, because they became the model, like they won 4 in pretty quick succession. But when they won that first one in 97, he was saying, like, by the end, they had to go through so much crap, so much doubt in the media, so many stories probably written that like pissed them off at the time, or things said. Like, he said it was almost like relief was the feeling, just like getting through that playoffs and finally winning the cup. And for the Leafs, it might even be some relief just winning this series. Like, if they can do it, like, because all this stuff comes up the minute, even when they're ahead right? In a series, it just comes up the minute of a sign of like, uh-oh. But I mean, I would counter with, if we were ever having an honest discussion and they're probably like, CJ, how can you say this or think this or write this? I would just say you've kind of earned it. And this is what it is. Like, this is the challenge. And the challenge is more pronounced in places where you haven't won a cup in a long time, and in places where you have a lot of fan base and you have a lot of media that cover the team as a result of that fan base. And, the Rangers went through this back in 94. That's why people still sort of like deify that cup, because Messier had his guarantee and they were even ahead in the final against Vancouver. I think it was 3-1 in that series, and it goes to game 7. And like, they were pushed to the absolute limit and had to go through all the doubts and carry a big franchise in terms of history and a big city in terms of population on its back. So anyway, it's just hard to win at the end of the day. And as we mentioned, already 3 teams are beat out. The Leafs and the Senators are still fighting, but can't wait for game 6 and maybe a game 7.
Let's get to those 3 teams that are out. Great work, by the way, on this Leafs Sens series on your end, by the way. But we should get to these teams that are out in the East. We know we will have a Washington-Carolina series in the second round. The Devils are out. The Montreal Canadiens are out. And the Florida Panthers are out too. Oh, sorry, excuse me. The Tampa Bay Lightning are out too. Sorry. The Florida Panthers are through to the next round. The Tampa Bay Lightning. I still can't get that out of my head because I had so much hope for Tampa Bay to win that series, and they're done. Like, Florida just steamrolled through them. Panthers scare me. Should we, you know what? We'll do it like this. Because I'm still shocked about how Tampa Bay got demolished. Like, what were you able to see out of that series? And why was Florida so effective? We know they were going to be that team, but I didn't expect it to be done this way. I didn't expect it to be done as quickly as it was.
Well, it's the 3rd straight year they're out in the first round. And quite honestly, they dodged a bullet the year prior to that. The Leafs had a chance to eliminate them in game 6 in 2022. And Tampa tied it in the 3rd period and won in overtime on a Braden Point goal. But it's possible we could be talking about, I realize this is the butterfly effect. I can't say that, but they've, it's been now a bit of runway since, their back-to-back cups and the COVID times and everything that came before that. So, I watched some of the interviews, Victor Hedman and Point actually post game, like those guys were crushed. And they really thought, like you did, that they had a team that they had sort of regrouped here and were in a spot to go on a run. And they also felt, last year's series with Florida went 5 games as well, that they were closer this time around. And I kind of concur with that. I mean, it was the Panthers are very skilled. They got Lundell and Marchand on their 3rd line. So, I mean, most teams don't have that level of depth in the league. And then they punish you. Like this series featured 2 suspensions. It featured another hit that was at least discussed about, could it be a suspension, or maybe 2. Actually, we kept the Mikkola hit and then Tkachuk on Gensel. I think that we talk about it at times being a copycat league. I think a lot of teams are looking at the Panthers and how aggressively that they play, in addition to being, they have skilled players too. But I think a lot of teams want to build, are mimicking the Panthers now, because you might go up with them with a bit more skill than they do, and they can neutralize that because of how they play. They're going to be a very tough out for anybody. And so they overwhelmed Tampa, I think. Vasilevsky didn't steal a game. I'm not putting it all on his shoulders. I know his numbers are not good through 5 games. When you lose 4 of them, the goalie's probably not going to have a good save percentage. But, they've just, I think it's an interesting time in for the Lightning. I know there's been some discussion already. Is it maybe time finally to look at a new head coach? I don't know what they're going to do there yet. But I think there'll be some soul searching. I mean, they made some hard we know that Julian Brisebois is not afraid of a hard decision. Right, he walked away from Steven Stamkos a year ago, which was, could have been an emotional decision for someone else, given what Stamkos meant to the franchise. He gets Gensel, makes big in-season trades. Unfortunately, Oliver Bjorkstrand wasn't available to the Lightning in the series; he was injured. But they brought back Yanni Gourde. They actually got, it's funny, the Lightning got some contributions down their lineup. It's the stars. Nikita Kucherov has now gone 15 playoff games without a goal.
Insane.
and obviously he's such a big power play weapon for them, maybe more as a setup guy than his shot, although certainly he has a shot too. Like the beauty about him is you don't know if he's shooting, passing, and you don't know which direction it's going. Like he's literally like a human pinball machine when you give him space on a power play. But the power play failed them in the series. So, their stars didn't get it done. If we're talking about the Leaf stars, I mean, Tampa stars, that's part of the answer, honestly. And then, unfortunately for Tampa, Brandon Hagel was knocked out early in Game 4, can't play Game 5, and was suspended for a game. So he's a star player that the Lightning didn't have for enough of the series, maybe to win one more, to stretch it out and maybe make it possible. So, I don't think it's a reinvent the wheel summer in Tampa, but, Brisebois will not, that guy will not rest. And I wouldn't be surprised to see, the dust hasn't even settled yet on their loss, but I could see some changes there because I think they still have the kind of players to think they're in a cup window, but that window's closing ever so slightly with each passing year.
I could see changes. The idea of Jon Cooper being among them, I'm not saying you suggested that at all, but I still have a hard time believing that. But reports are starting to surface that maybe there's an interest from Utah and the relationship between him and owner Ryan Smith could be in play. Like, what do you think of that?
Well, it's a fact, right? They spend some of their summers in the same place. They know each other. Ryan Smith knows a lot of hockey people. People have, he's been linked to Ray Whitney for the same reasons. Like, look, just because you're buddies with someone in hockey doesn't mean you have to employ them. Otherwise, everybody would employ everybody because it's a very small league in that sense. Like, there's, a lot of people know a lot of people. What I would say about Jon Cooper is that if he was ever available, forget just Utah. Like, right now, we already currently have 8 coach openings for head coaches. And I don't think you could discount the possibility good to great teams in the league still might change their coaching situation if Jon Cooper would go there. So, I mean, he could pick his spot. What's really unique about Tampa and Cooper is how long the Lightning have stuck with him, right? Like they had a chance if they wanted to, or if they wanted to do the easy thing, which often organizations, I think, take an easy way out by firing a head coach. Like they had a historical season and got swept by Columbus, right? This is before they won either of those cups. And they had an opportunity to fire him. They missed the playoffs with Jon Cooper after going to a Stanley Cup final. Like in that situation, you might go, do you know what? Maybe the coach has lost it. Like he helped get us to that final. Yeah. And the conference final, but then we missed the playoffs. Like what's going on here? They've been abnormally loyal in a sport where there's no loyalty, especially to coaches, to this guy. But, it still might be time. I mean, Jon Cooper might feel that. But I mean, you're talking about Team Canada's head coach right now, right? Yeah. He's the Four Nations coach. Like he is at the top of the sport. I think he deservedly so is considered the best coach in hockey right now with the results he's had. And so I don't think that's dimmed even by the fact the Lightning have lost in 3 straight first rounds. So, I would be, people are making the link because him and Ryan Smith are buddies, but I just would caution you slightly, or anyone who's suggesting that, I don't mean you, Julian, I would caution against everyone thinking that's a foregone conclusion because I do believe multiple teams would fire a really good coach to hire Jon Cooper like tomorrow, like yesterday. So if, and it's a huge if, he becomes available, like this would be it's already shaping up as maybe the craziest coaching offseason we've seen. I mean, we haven't even got into Mike Sullivan parting ways with Pittsburgh. Rick Tocchet chose to turn down a 5-year deal in Vancouver. You got all these teams looking for coaches. If Tampa joins that mix, what's going to happen with Colorado or Dallas ever looking to change? Obviously Colorado, as we're recording this, down 3-2 in the series.
That would be wild.
I'm not, look, they both have excellent head coaches. Again, the similar type of guys where I'd make the same speech that, do you know how many teams would love to get their hands on these guys? But I guess the point is it's just an uncertain time, right, for coaches. And then the fact that so many teams are looking for them, buckle up, buddy. It's a real carousel this year. The carousel is on warp speed.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely wanted to get into the coaching carousel stuff. I know we have a bunch of playoff content to also go through, but
I know we're running so long today. That's my fault.
We could go through the coaching carousel stuff now, actually, considering how pressing news it is, and we could get to some other storylines as we go through the rest of this episode. But since we've opened the door on Jon Cooper, what the fact that Mike Sullivan out in Pittsburgh, parting ways, just that's how it's been described. At least he gets to call his shot too.
To be fair, like I see people getting into this, they could fire him. Like they could have just straight up fired him, in which they would have to owe him all that was remaining on his contract. He had 2 years left, and he would have been paid out over that time. And then if he got hired, the new team and the Penguins split that money. Parting ways means you make a deal on your way out the door. Parting ways is a conversation where you're like, I don't know if this is working for you. Is this working for you? And you make some kind of agreement to end the employment. So I don't think it's just PR. I think it's actually, there is a big difference in the two outcomes. And, for Mike Sullivan, I know there's mixed emotions, right? He spent almost 10 full years, but 10 parts of 10 seasons in Pittsburgh, won his 2 cups there and had a lot of success, built great relationships with the core players of that team, loved the community. But I mean, what an appealing time to become a free agent. He was already getting paid in the $5 million range-ish. It's $6 to $7 million a year is probably what's coming on his next deal. And there's, places like the Rangers, I think is natural to link him to. Belief is, as Jim Rutherford said, and they're good friends, obviously, from the Pittsburgh time, that he wants to stay on the East Coast for family reasons. He's a grandpa now. But there's a few different options that could play out there. And so, I can understand it from both sides. I don't think that the Penguins are going to be ready to win quickly enough, probably for someone like Mike Sullivan's liking. It's honestly an extension of the Crosby conversation we've had. And I think the circumstances are different, but it's just hard. You have these people that are great at their job and you love them, but there's a lot more that goes into it. So Sullivan's going to end up very well paid, and he's going to end up with a fantastic organization trying to win today, right now. And he wasn't going to have that in Pittsburgh. They were still going to move guys out, and it could include their bigger players as we go along here. So, I think it made sense for him and the organization to shake hands and go in separate directions.
Is there a team out there right now? We know there's a bunch who are looking for coaches. Is there a team in particular you are feeling the most for Mike Sullivan and his services?
Yeah, the Rangers is the one for me. I mean, it's the place that I think they most need someone like him. They need an impact hire there. And they've gone through a lot of coaches too, right? Like they had Laviolette and Gerard Gallant, and not that long really removed from David Quinn. Like they've churned through coaches. But I think for a team that is definitely not thinking rebuild, even though they've made a lot of changes and ended up missing the playoffs this season, they need a winner and a competitor and someone with a lot of experience. And there's a few coaches out there with that kind of resume, but I think Sullivan goes to the top of the pile. And so, as much as the Rangers at times feel like an organization that's not the most functional one, with an owner that can be a little unpredictable, with the team that went from a conference final and a President's Trophy to missing the playoffs entirely, it's still an appealing job, incredibly appealing job. And they also have huge financial backing to, roll out the red carpet. So I think that makes the most sense. If it doesn't happen, we'll have to see. I mean, if you're sticking to the East Coast, I mean, there's been talk about Boston. I'm not sure about that fit as well. I mean, could a guy go to Philadelphia after leaving Pittsburgh? I mean, I guess Ron Hextall did it in the front office, but it almost feels wrong given the animus between those cities. Maybe someone comes off the board and someone that I'm not qualifying. But basically, until I see what the Rangers are doing, they have to be the favorite.
You bringing up Philly and Pittsburgh and Ron Hextall just reminded me there was a brief time when Jaromir Jagr was a Flyer, and that was really weird.
Yeah, that was like after 3 years in Russia, after he'd already gone through Washington and the Rangers, and that was after a long stretch of time, and it still felt weird. So to go right from the Penguins bench to the Flyers bench, it almost feels like it'd be sacrilegious, but who knows? Look, our thoughts obviously with Ray Shero. We've talked about that at a funeral for him here recently, but Ray Shero grew up in the Flyers organization with his dad, Fred, and then his probably biggest professional moment was running the Penguins when they won a Stanley Cup in 2009. So, it's not unprecedented. It's just a lot of players, a lot of executives and coaches. It's a little oil and water-ish. It's sort of like historically, you don't have a lot of players that played for the Habs and the Bruins or the Habs and the Leafs or, Rangers and Islanders. Yes, it happens, but those teams generally don't trade with each other, and those teams generally don't sign each other's free agents or what have you. It's just I think there's something there that's built up over a long period of time.
Future episode idea, the guys who have found a way to play for all those different rivalries on both sides. Anyway, Rick Tocchet, we mentioned him just now. What's next for him? Philadelphia seems like a fit, but it's not a guarantee, obviously.
No, I don't think it's a slam dunk by any stretch. I mean, look, that people have been making the connection for a long time. Rick Tocchet he's got the Philly connections, right? He played there, and is loved in that city, and seems to, I think he has be very relatable for that, that organization and that fan base. But I think they're also looking at a team that's a little younger, wondering, in the NCAA ranks, maybe what could make sense for them. And so I do believe there's a bit of a search going on in Philly. Would it surprise me if Tocchet ended up there? No. We'll have to see how things shake down. I mean, ultimately, it was him leaving Vancouver. It was a tough year for everyone in the Canucks organization. That goes without saying. But I think he just didn't feel comfortable there totally. He wasn't enjoying himself. And as I said, it wasn't a matter of the organization not stepping up to sign him or prioritizing him. They made him a nice offer, and he just chose to, I think there's family parts of that decision. I mean, it's a big decision, right? Especially if you feel you have some leverage, probably especially at a time like this where there's multiple jobs out there. And, it kind of been in the air, but I think at times Rick Tocchet himself went back and forth on what he wanted to do, but the Canucks organization really feels like it's in a bit of a perilous state, quite honestly, with the Quinn Hughes' future uncertain, and, Elias Pettersson had such a big drop off. Now, maybe, I don't think we can discount the fact that while Rick Tocchet did a lot of good things in Vancouver, including getting them to this Game 7 of the second round last year, Elias Pettersson's play dropped off while he was the coach. Now, I'm not saying that's all coaching, but I don't think we can discount the fact that with a new coach, it might be a different result, and that Pettersson maybe has. I just think he's too soon to write off entirely. But I mean, he's cratered. His career is cratered. There's just no way around it. And if you tie up that kind of money in him as your first line center, and he's not performing like a first line center, it's just hard to make up for that. It's hard to get someone to play that position. And what do you do with the guy making all that dough who's not producing? So, I can understand. And, there's the whole Quinn Hughes question. Is Jim Rutherford opened that door? We've been down that path. And so Tocchet's out there. And I think Philly, again, if we were installing the favorites, I'd say Philly, but I definitely don't think it's a foregone conclusion, 100% done or anything like that.
We'll be on the coaching carousel as it continues to spin throughout this offseason. Any final thoughts on New Jersey and Montreal, two other teams who were eliminated Wednesday night?
Quickly, I think Montreal, great days ahead. A victory to get into the playoffs right at the end of the season, to get Ivan Demidov over here and see him in some games, they reignited a fan base this season. And so while I'm sure they're disappointed to lose out in 5 to the Capitals, who've, really took a massive step this year with the organization, I still think this is a win of a season in Montreal, and better days are ahead. Bigger expectations are ahead. Biggest question for me is what they do with the center ice position. Do they find someone to play second line center behind Nick Suzuki this offseason? I know they're going to try, but that's it can be a tough hole to fill. But I do think nice to see David Savard be feted into. Maybe I'm jumping ahead to my stick tap, but it was his last game. He's acknowledged he's going to retire this offseason. Pretty cool to see the way he was celebrated coming off the ice. I think just a real win for the Habs all around. They took the step. Now they've set the floor of what their standard has to be, and they want to move forward. As for New Jersey, it's just hard to get around the injuries, right? They had really an up and down season. They had a fantastic start and then lost key pieces and then lost more players when they got to the playoffs. They basically had like 3 defensemen from their main 6 playing in the playoffs. I don't think too many teams could survive for too long under those conditions. Jacob Markstrom did his best to help them get there. Let's see what they rebound with next year. Hopefully a little more health, but it's just hard to draw any conclusions from the season and specifically the way it ended when they were missing just absolute frontline important players to the amount they were.
Okay, since we're running long, we won't go through every Western series, but I do want your thoughts on Winnipeg, St. Louis, and Connor Hellebuck bouncing back, and the war of words between Scott Arniel and Jim Montgomery. That seems like that was a very interesting back and forth regarding the injury of Mark Scheifele. And if you have an update on him, if you can provide it.
Spicy series, this one. And, big consequences for both teams. I mean, St. Louis is one of the best teams in the league in the second half. And even though, at a certain point, we thought they might be a team that was selling at the trade deadline, they entered the playoffs as, I think, kind of a potential team that could go on a run. And they still could, of course. So, I commend Connor Hellebuck. There's 2 days between game 4 and 5. He was nominated officially for the Vezina Trophy in that window. And he came out and spoke to the media. And obviously, I'm biased in this. If you're just a fan, you're probably like, who cares about the media? But as a media guy, I care about the media.
Yeah.
And I really commend him for coming out and saying, like, I studied the position. He said, I'm going to be better. He's like, no one studied this position harder than me. And he came out in game 5 and he gave up a tough goal. The 2-2 goal was a tough goal against. But he shut the door from there and the Jets found a way to win without Scheifele in the lineup. And I think that matters. I mean, Winnipeg, as great as they've been now, 2 straight regular seasons, they're still got to prove something to themselves. They're looking to go on a playoff run. I think that the stakes are huge there. And Hellebuck, I expect to be one of the Hart Trophy nominees too. So, Hellebuck has to be their guy. And I thought he responded under duress. He and the team had 2 tough games in St. Louis. He's pulled in both of them, bounced back, huge win. Love the war words with the coaches. I think that's a reflection of the emotion in the series. For anyone who missed it, essentially, there was some discussion about what knocked Scheifele out. He took a big hit from Braden Shen that the Jets didn't like in that game. He continued to play, and then he took a subsequent hit from Radek Faksa. Jim Montgomery at the podium postgame said, well, why are we even talking about the Shen hit? It was the Faksa hit that knocked him out. And Arniel I think that's like crossing wires. Like, you can't say, you don't have all the information. You can't say. And so Arniel, what did he say? Do you have the quote? It was like, where did he get his medical degree from or something like that?
So the direct quote, just taking it off the article I have in front of me, I didn't know Monty got his medical degree, trying to say how our player got hurt. He's way off base. He should not make that comment. That's part of it.
Exactly. And so, but I love it. I think it's a reflection of, for the Jets losing Mark Scheifele, if it's anything serious, I don't have any information. You worry about a head injury or something like that because of the physical toll he's taken in this series and because he took those 2 hits, specifically before leaving in the first period on Wednesday night. The stakes are huge for Winnipeg if he can't play, right? So you can understand where Arniel might be frustrated. He also doesn't like his counterpart weighing in on Jets business. Everything always usually these playoffs start and everyone tiptoes. You don't want to cross certain lines and then you get into it and it's just like, we're on the battlefield now. So can't wait for game 6 in that one. Cause that feels like a series that's going 7. I'm not trying to make predictions, but it's been a homer series so far. Home teams won all 5 games. I think the Blues still got some life in them and they definitely are physically engaged in the series and have been right from the get-go.
Damn, you're not in the business of making predictions. I was going to ask for your thoughts on these 3 other Western series and how they would all end up tonight with Vegas, Minnesota, Dallas, Colorado, and Los Angeles, and Edmonton. But nuts to that, you don't want to give us a prediction for either of those games. I understand. That's okay. We can still, though, the fact that we have 4 elimination games tonight, craziness. Love it for the first round.
Well, I'll go quickly. I think Edmonton finishes off the Kings.
Man.
What an opportunity they have on home ice after roaring back into this series. Kings are reeling a bit. I think Edmonton gets it done tonight. I think Minnesota mounts a stand. I mean, they're in the same position, but I think they mount a stand and push it to game 7 in Vegas. And what's the third one I've got to remember again?
Dallas, Colorado.
Dallas, Colorado. That was 7. That was 7 before it started. I know producer Drew he's a Colorado Avalanche fan, and he's a little worried about his team, but I don't see their season ending on home ice. I think we got a game 7 coming in that series too.
All right. Do you have a stick tap? I think we already kind of went through what we thought was going to happen for Game 6 tonight in Toronto, Ottawa earlier in the episode, so we can skip that. Do you have is David Savard your stick tap for today?
David Savard. Pardon my Anglo pronunciation.
You can do David Savard. It's okay. I just,
David Savard, great guy. Won a Stanley Cup in Tampa. Remember, he was a deadline acquisition from Columbus. Had a nice run in Montreal. And, they chose to keep him this year in Montreal, in part because of what he does on the ice, but also they really valued the presence he brought to that team kind of in a transitionary period. And what he's trying to do anywhere you work, anywhere in your life, you try to leave something better than you found it. I think David Savard left the Montreal Canadiens in their dressing room in a better place than when he arrived, and wish him the best in retirement.
I'll give a hat tip to Arpon Basu, who a couple days ago wrote an article on how important David Savard has been to developing some of the younger players on defense for the Montreal Canadiens. He wrote about it in The Athletic. I think it's worth a read especially for Habs fans, but also people who want to know more about David. Worth your time. Absolutely. My stick tap will go to Dalton Varsha of the Toronto Blue Jays, who I think made one of the most incredible catches I have ever seen in my life. CJ, you do not pay attention to the Blue Jays anymore, but we're talking about a man so Jared Durant of the Red Sox hitting it out to the warning track. As Varsho's running to the wall, he stumbles and falls and rolls, and as he gets himself together, like he's kind of holding his glove, like kind of backhandedly, and it falls into his glove. It's one of the most, BBC was sharing this on social media earlier this week, if you want to get a sense of how crazy the catch was. And that's how I explained a Blue Jays highlight to Chris Johnston, who I know for sure has not seen it because he is Ray Charles to the Blue Jays right now. You have not seen it.
I'm not giving them my energy. I'm not even giving them my hate.
It's a really good catch.
I appreciate that, but you surprised me. I didn't expect a baseball stick tap, hat tip, whatever.
I love the game. I love the game. Look, man, I had to. I was kind of playing off the fact that you don't like the Jays, so it was a funny little moment.
It's not that I don't. No, I'm not. I'm just no energy, no hate, nothing. I'm ambivalent.
All right. I'm glad you've committed to that. Anyway. Great work as always.
And I'll be back once they purge the front office, as I've said.
And when that day comes, brother, when that day comes. Anyway, get your questions in for Ask CJ. We'll get to them on our next episode of the Chris Johnston Show. And enjoy the rest of these playoff series as we go through the final weekend of the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. For CJ, I'm Julian. Enjoy the rest of your week.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.